Welcome to Bruce Mackey's Library. I'm Sierra, pronouns they, them, and I'll be your host slash librarian. Normally, we'll be discussing the books in the Degrassi franchise in the chronological order of which they've been published, and normally you can read along those books in an ebook format in a link that I'll be linking down below in the description. But today, instead, we'll be discussing our librarian, not me, but instead Mr. Bruce Mackey. I'm sure you've all heard a little bit of the shorter version, but today we're just going to get into the longer version because he's just so important. So Bruce was born in 1938. He was the middle of three brothers, and his parents were described as hard-living, tax-paying, blue-collar workers in Toronto's East End. As teenagers, the brothers could be found in front of a television watching sports, swigging beer, and screaming obscenities. Upon leaving secondary school, both of his brothers worked in trades, but Bruce went to university and got a degree in education. He spoke French fluently and was able to speak other languages, playfully butchered them, but he was considered the queer one, like the odd one, and they never really found out how queer he actually was. He was boisterous and fun, enjoyed beer and sports, and always insisted on everyone having a good time. That's according to page 22 of The Mother of All Degrassi. And honestly, speaking French is really, really hard. I can imagine learning a second language of any kind is really hard, but I've been trying to learn how to read French, and it's hard. It's really hard because, yeah. But he went to Toronto University, or University of Toronto, and worked on the Toronto Board of Education for 25 years. He met Linda after his first year of working at Earl Grey Public School while eating lunch in the staff room, and Linda didn't want to talk to anyone. She was really tired. She was reading a book, and she thought that meant nobody would want to talk to her. And for me, I would be so annoyed if someone persisted and talked to me anyway. But Bruce talked to her anyway, and he found out that she was currently walking to and from work due to a transit strike, so he offered to give her a ride. And she wasn't expecting him to actually do it for the entire length of the strike, but he did, and that strike ended up being 23 days long. That's like a record, according to Linda, and that's kind of wild to me that 23 days would be a record, but also imagine 23 days of walking to and from work. So that's really cool. That's really nice of him. And Linda calls Bruce her cheerleader, her general assistant, and her driver because of this. And they just had a really great friendship. They really got to know each other through those car rides. She was a virtual stranger to him, and he didn't have to offer her that, and it just means a lot to know that he did. You can see through that small act that Bruce was someone who was dependable and just really friendly and nice. And we all know he continued to show his generosity by loaning Linda his house to film Ida Makes a Movie in, as well as, of course, finding her that book that, ended up being a kid's book that was a total mistake, but, some of the best things happen because of mistake, such as Degrassi. And you may not know that he only said, "Go hog wild filming in my house," because she had to watch his dogs in return. And, that's totally understandable. That makes sense. The dogs are probably in the house. There's speculation that his dogs even were on Degrassi in Sophie Minds the Store with him when he was customer Mr. Mackey, which brings me to the section of Bruce on Degrassi and in Degrassi books. So Bruce was in 5 episodes of The Kids at Degrassi Street. He was on the first time in 1982 on Sophie Minds the Store, credited as customer with dogs. I'm gonna guess those were his dogs, but there's no proof, so I don't know. Don't quote me on that. In 1983, he was in Pete Takes a Chance as the teacher. And then again, 3 more times in 1985 in Rachel Runs for Office, Jeffrey Finds a Friend, and Lisa Gets the Picture, credited as Mr. Mackey. But we can also know that by this time, they had been friends for years. They had been working together in the school and on Degrassi for years. And he had already come out to Linda, but kind of in a unique way and kind of as a whisper. She says in her book, "In his unique way, he had confirmed to me his sexuality. Through him, I was about to get a window in the tumultuous world of the 1970s and 80s gay scene in Toronto. He came out to her just by saying that he wasn't going to go home with her when she was ready to go home. Instead, he was just going to wave goodbye and keep talking to a guy he was talking to. And he had a big smile on his face. He was happy to talk to this guy. And by that, she just knew, oh, he's gay. And like, it's just the smallest little thing. I don't know. I feel like that's kind of the way that Tristan came out to Tori, probably. Like, it wasn't a big deal. It didn't have to be a big thing. And he just felt comfortable, I guess, to just do that. So this was just like a secret between him and Linda. The students didn't know. None of the kids working on the show knew. And if you go to the book Griff Gets a Hand, you'll see almost the same dedication that's in The Mother of All Degrassi. The dedication for Griff Gets a Hand is to Bruce Mackey, the grandfather of Degrassi Street, and a dear friend of the kids. And then Linda and hers is to Bruce, Degrassi's queer grandfather. So he's still a grandfather. He's still hugely important, whether we know he's queer or not. And I think that's really beautiful. She wasn't trying to market on the queer factor or anything. He wasn't a token queer. He was her best friend. And that's really important. But also the fact that he's queer is majorly important. So in the background of all of these episodes and all of the behind the scenes loaning his house and everything, Bruce had this double life of being a queer man. And as Linda said, it was tumultuous in the 1970s and 80s gay scene Toronto. So I'm going to give a little bit of a trigger warning right here. Trigger warning for gay bashing and just homophobia. And yeah, I'm sorry. If you don't want to hear this, you should just skip ahead a little bit. It's important, but it's also hard to talk about and hard to listen to, of course. It sucks that it even happened, but it did, and we're going to talk about it. Or I'm going to talk about it, and you might listen, you might not, and that's okay. So he would often go to bathhouses, which were very dangerous at the time, due to often being raided. It's like Stonewall, but Canadian, basically. And bathhouses were a little bit more sexual than bars, I'm pretty sure. Once on Bruce's birthday in 1981, Bruce was born on February 6th. So February 6th, 1981, he had plans to go to a bathhouse, but thankfully those plans were changed before it was raided. And this is just like a lucky little happenstance for him, but thankfully he wasn't there. That night, 4 bathhouses were raided, and 253 men were charged just for being at these places. You can read more about that on page 25 of The Mother of All Degrassi. But it really just, the wrong place, wrong time, and it could have been him. And that's why you'll see in the next little clip, trigger warning for gay bashing that turns into unaliving someone. I also feel like that was just, he knew it could have been him. Wrong place, wrong time kind of deal. So I recorded that clip yesterday, and I'm just going to put that right here. If you don't want to hear about it, I would say skip forward about 12 and a half minutes and then get back to me. And I'll completely understand, and I won't be hurt at all for it. So we hear about Kenneth Zeller first on the page 24 of Mother of All Degrassi, and we just kind of read it gently as, well, Bruce read this newspaper and found out that a man was murdered, and he was really upset about it. But, like, Linda didn't know why, and Bruce could tell by the location of the murder that because he was murdered in the spot, it meant that because he was gay. I'm horrible at words. I'm sorry, I'm nervous. And this is upsetting. But Linda didn't get it. She didn't understand. And here's the thing. She thought Bruce must know him. That's why he's so upset. He's a fellow librarian. You know, they're in the same area. They're both in the same age group, in the same occupation. They must know each other. But for me, what it really boils down to is actually Bruce thought this could have been him. This could have been me if I were in this place. If I had gone to High Park, also known as Lover's Lane, at the same exact date, at the same exact time, as I often go to this location anyway, because I am a gay man, this could have been me. And it was strictly just wrong place, wrong time. They couldn't have looked at Kenneth or at Bruce and instantly said, that's a gay man. But they go to this location and they instantly can say, anyone here is a gay man. And that sucks. So you must also be thinking, oh, they must have come here because they intended to kill someone. And that ended up being true. But nobody found out until the second newspaper. So for a while, there was just no actual proof that that's why he was murdered. So I'll take you through a bit of that. So at first, Linda just reads, Kenneth Zeller, 40 years old, was found slumped over in the front seat of his car at 12:25 a.m. on Sunday. An autopsy revealed that Mr. Zeller, a librarian at Williamson Road Public School, died of a fractured skull. And that little snippet tells you virtually nothing. It didn't even say the location at first. And then you go on a little bit farther to know that Bruce knew from chatter, fear, and anger mounting in the gay community that the location is why he was killed. And then months later, we get another newspaper when the 5 teenage killers were each sentenced to 9 years in prison. The press coverage finally talked about the motive other than theft. The Globe and Mail reported, I'm so sorry, the night of June 21st, 1985, it is the last day of school and the longest day of the year that 8 friends from a Toronto neighborhood, all under 18, decide to celebrate. They get some beer, borrow a truck, and set off. People in a park overhear them planning a visit to High Park to, and I quote, beat up a fag, and another quote, get money from a queer. So when I read that, I instantly thought, okay, what happened to these teenagers? What were their ramifications? What was the result of this? So that's why I had to dig a little deeper. And I found out that while it started off as 8 boys, 3 left the group. They just thought it was getting to be too much. The other 5 were going too far. So it said, when I was digging a little bit deeper on murdervillage.com, that they had chased him for 130 meters, which for me, I did have to Google to find out, is actually less than a mile, but still, to chase a man that far is a bit much, in my opinion. And they followed him to his car and smashed in his windows and kicked him and pushed him around and were trying to steal his money. But the money just seemed like an afterthought to a lot of them. It was really just about him being gay and them being super drunk. So the ages of these killers at the trial were 15, 16, 16, 16, and 18. The oldest being 18 just kind of blew my mind because I don't really know how jail works in Canada, but like here in America, I still don't even know how it works. It's wild. So I don't want to go too deep into like exactly how this happened. If you want to do your own research and figure it all out, I went to murdervillage.com and en-academic.com, and then after that I found a podcast called Creepy InQueeries, episode number 24, where you can find out way more than I even wanted to know. But the end result is all 5 of them beat him for about 3 minutes. The killers were seen weeping as Justice Gregory Evans sentenced them each to 9 years in prison after they pleaded guilty. The 4 who were under the age of 18 were permitted 72-hour unescorted temporary passes to continue their high school classes and graduate. So they admitted at the trial that they did not know they had murdered him, but it still happened and they still needed some consequences because they did intend to at least hurt him. But I wanted to know more about Kenneth Zeller and his reputation, so thankfully a commenter on murdervillage.com named Tara said he was our librarian at Davisville Public School, and we all loved him. I remember being excited to go to the library on rainy days, and he would read us stories. He was so kind. She commented that on December 22nd, 2022 at 2:47 a.m. And while that's years apart from when he passed, for me that speaks even louder because he had been dead longer than I have been alive, and someone still remembers him and speaks kindly of him, and that's just, okay, I can't stop crying. It's beautiful. It's the smallest little comment, and you could say that about so many librarians, but many of us don't remember our librarians after all those years. That's over 30 years, and you're still remembering, and at 2:47 a.m., like these thoughts are apparently keeping you up at night, and you can't stop thinking about them because you miss them so much. And oh, that's so beautiful. Anyway, according to inacademic.com, he was a teacher librarian at Williamson Road Junior Public School, as well as a teacher at Western Technical Commercial School. And his murder was the subject of a play called Steel Kiss, which was produced by Buddies in Bad Times Theater, according to Inacademic. But according to MurderVillage.com, it was made at Poor Alex Theater in late 1987 by an artist named Robin Fullard. And then a few years after this, the Toronto District School Board implemented a program designed to eliminate discrimination based on sexual orientation. And this wasn't just in their students with bullying, but also in their teachers. They implemented different ways to teach about the queer community because all of the killers were 18 and under, and that's just their ages at the trial. The trial was in November and the murder happened in June. So I don't actually know how old they were when they murdered him, but I'm going to assume it was pretty young or around the same age, And I'm still crying. It's just, here in America, we wouldn't have handled it the same way. We would have shoved it down even more. We would have don't say gay billed about it, especially back then. This is during the AIDS crisis and during Ronald Reagan. And okay, sorry, I had to pause and take a drink and just, whew. So, yeah, I feel like Bruce really thought this could have been me. If I was just in that park, it would have been me right then and there. And I think that because when I first saw Bruce, I had already known he was gay. I heard that Bruce was gay before I even knew who he was because of hearing about him on Jocelyn's podcast. That's how I heard about him for the first time in the Queer History of Degrassi episode. So I instantly got Bruce Mackey was a gay librarian, and this is what he did. And I got the short version of that. And then when I got the longer version of that, it was in Linda Schuyler's memoir, where the dedication is Degrassi's queer grandfather. So then I go see him on The Kids of Degrassi Street when I'm watching those episodes, and I don't instantly say, oh yeah, he looks gay. Like, nothing about him struck me as a stereotypical gay man or anything like that. He was just a loving, caring teacher, and that was it. So I feel like Kenneth Zeller probably looked the same way. And we never get confirmation, not that we need it, not that we deserve it, that he wasn't gay either. We never get that because it didn't matter. It was confirmation bias to them, it feels like. They set out to beat up a fag, get money from a queer, and they went to Lover's Lane, a place rumored to be full of gay people, and found someone who was just walking alone, and they were like, oh, that's one guy. I can overtake him. I can do what I need to do, steal money, beat him up, whatever. And that was it. They perceived him to be gay, but we'll never know if he was, and we don't need to know. What we need to know is really just what Linda told us. But for me, I dug deeper because I saw myself in Bruce. I see myself in this queer male librarian because I'm queer, I want to be a librarian, and I am non-binary. So I dug deeper because I saw myself the same way Bruce saw himself. If I were, actually, not even if I were, right now, if I went to a gayborhood, a gay neighborhood, and it was late at night and I was alone walking back to my car if I had one, I could easily get attacked by 5 teenage boys and be murdered by them. If Bruce were in Hyde Park late at night walking back to his car all alone, he could have easily been attacked. And nowadays, it wouldn't have been handled the way it was back then, in the way of the after effect of implementing new school policies and all of that. It would have been handled in, oh, this person was just murdered. They were just in this location and that was that. And I don't trust that America would have done anything. But we don't need to focus on that. And I'm going to get away from it. I'm going to transition very poorly into something else because I feel uncomfortable talking about this more. And, yeah, sorry. So, if you want to hear more about Kenneth Zeller, I would recommend going to the Creepy InQueeries podcast. That's spelled like I-N and then queer-ease. Go to episode number 24. You'll see Kenneth Zeller's name in the title, and the first story in that episode is all about him and goes into deeper detail about all of the things that happened that night that I just, as you can tell, can't bring myself to really say. It was easier to read about this and write it down than it was to actually say it, and even doing that was just really hard for me. So, thank you for listening if you did, and we're going to move on to the next section of my notes so we can try to transition into that. Sorry. Oh, sorry. So, while everything is happening in the background with the queer community, Degrassi is still recording the kids of Degrassi Street, and they don't get to any queer issues until Degrassi Junior High. So, while all of that is happening, Bruce was in 5 episodes of the kids of Degrassi Street. The first one happening in 1982. On Sophie Minds the Store, he's credited as Customer with Dogs. And then in 1983, he's on Pete Takes a Chance, credited as Teacher. And then again, 3 more times in 1985, when everything was happening with Kenneth Zeller, Bruce is in the episodes Rachel Runs for Office, Jeffrey Finds a Friend, and Lisa Gets the Picture, credited as Mr. Mackey. And then his next cameo on Degrassi wasn't until 1989 in the episode Star-Crossed as a teacher at Borden High, and that was his last one. So, again, no queer episodes because he wasn't out yet and because that's not what Degrassi was really handling back. The only actually queer episodes that were made while Bruce Mackey was alive are Rumor Has It and He Ain't Heavy. You can try to count Bad Blood if you want to, but it just doesn't for me. And these aren't even main queer characters. These are all side characters, and the only one that Bruce Mackey is even mentioned in is Bad Blood, and he's not mentioned in the episode. Just a thank you in the credits. It isn't queer, it's just an AIDS episode. There's a straight character getting AIDS, and he'll never come out as queer because he isn't. So Bruce was also given a thank you in the credits of many Degrassi episodes. In 8 episodes of Kids of Degrassi Street, he was given a thank you for Cookie Goes to Hospital, Irene Moves In, Noel Buys a Suit, Lisa Makes the Headlines, and Sophie Minds the Store. And then again in Pete Takes a Chance, Chuck Makes a Choice, Billy Breaks the Chain, and then in one episode of Degrassi Junior High, again, not the one you would expect, not Rumor Has It, not the queer one, but instead in the episode Can't Live With Them, Part 1. And then a final 2 times in Degrassi High, in A New Start Part 1, and then in Bad Blood Part 1. Again, none of these are queer issues. Bruce never came out, so my guess is he wasn't credited with a thank you in any of the queer episodes episodes because he wasn't out to his family, but like I can't confirm that. That's just like a little fan theory, I guess, of mine. But this just indicates how strong his double life was, and I think that's beautiful that Linda really protected him. I can't say for sure if he was given a thank you in a queer episode what it would have meant, if it would have raised any suspicions for anybody that he knew. Obviously, I wasn't even born until sadly after he had, well, no, I was 2 when he passed, but still, it's wild. I feel like that's why in the beginning, when we have queer characters, we don't get the confirmation. We just get like, oh, Miss Avery, she might be gay. There's a rumor about it. Or we get Snake's character book where he is struggling with his sexuality and the reader knows, but people around him don't really know. And that's a way we can see Bruce's mark later on, and you can know that Avery's storyline in Rumor Has It was inspired by Bruce because Linda's students started rumors that Linda and Bruce were dating. She talks about this on page 22 of The Mother of All Degrassi. And if you go back and watch Rumor Has It, Kathleen was starting to make rumors that Miss Avery and Raditch might have been dating. And then you can also see Raditch picked up Avery from school that day. And that's what Bruce did. Bruce drove Linda home from school. So like for me, it's the same. You can see the similarities. Most people will go straight to the obvious Marco becoming a teacher as Bruce's mark on Degrassi. Marco the mark. Anyway. Sorry. But like for me, that kind of feels really out of nowhere due to him constantly saying he wanted to be a social worker and then like never mentioning teaching before. I feel like you can see small glimpses of the Kenneth Zeller story in Marco's coming out episode, Pride Part 2, when he goes to the park by accident. And you can see that he clearly makes a phone call to Jimmy and he says, I got off at the wrong stop. He didn't mean to be there. It was the wrong place at the wrong time. And that's very Kenneth Zeller. So I feel like Marco's storylines are probably not really based on Bruce, but this is just my vantage point as a fan. I can't say for sure. I see more of Kenneth in Snake's character book when you can see that Snake is being the innocent bystander, just like the 3 boys who split off from the other 5 who were called innocent bystanders. And then you can see it again on page 140 through 143, just the way Snake thinks to himself about how the people they bully and bash, air quotes, could have been anybody. Could have even been Glenn, his brother. Meaning they were only bashed due to being in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like Kenneth. Both times they went to the same purple building, which we see again with Marco. So we even see a story that Bruce brought to Linda that she didn't understand being shown on the screen in Degrassi. This is Bruce's impact, just as her friend and her librarian. Look, if Bruce wasn't at Earl Grey Public School, just in the right place at the right time, he wouldn't be Degrassi's queer librarian. He'd be just a random queer librarian, sadly. But thankfully, he's ours. And we get to see his mark and his story. So sadly, Bruce Mackey was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer before Christmas in 1996. He gave his power of attorney to Nancy Sinclair and Linda Schuyler before he passed away on February 28, 1997. For reference, that is 22 days after his 59th birthday and less than 3 months after his diagnosis. His obituary tells us he was a dear brother to William, also known as Bill, and Michael Mackey. He'll be sadly missed by his several nieces and nephews. The family held wakes for him at Wallace Funeral Home at 130 Main Street in Brighton on the Sunday after his passing at 2 p.m. through 4 p.m. and 7 p.m. through 9 p.m., as well as an official cremation at St. Paul's Anglican Church on Monday, March 3rd at 1 p.m. As an expression of sympathy, donations to the charity of your choice would be appreciated by the family. While many characters on Degrassi receive cancer diagnoses, the closest one to Bruce for me is Snake because of his character book and his job as a teacher, and how close he is to many of the kids. None of the cancer diagnoses on Degrassi are pancreatic cancer, but I don't think that they need to be inspired by or show a connection to Bruce. One of the best ways we can remember Bruce is through community, which is why Degrassi's emphasis is on community. And we see that in Bruce Mackey Park, a way that he was remembered after he had passed. In May of 2002, Nancy Sinclair, the chair of the Playing with Time Foundation, requested a renaming of Wardell Parkette to Bruce Mackey Park. She suggested that they rename the park after him because he was a big impactor on the community, and he had walking tours with the students back when he was a teacher. And so in May 2002, she requested, and then the Toronto East York Community Council recommended the adoption of the report on December 17th of 2002 from the Commissioner of Economic Development, Culture, and Tourism. There were no financial implications resulted, so there were 3 meetings held about it on February 4th and 5th and 6th of 2003. Meaning the last meeting about this was held on his birthday. That's really cool. I just love that little fun fact. And this was in between the airing of Fight for Your Right and How Soon Is Now. That's season 2, episodes 19 and 20. And it went through pretty easily. They put up 3 plaques about Bruce Mackey in this park, and they were all designed by Arlene Lott. She played Rachel on Kids of Degrassi Street and Nancy on Degrassi Junior High, meaning she was in a couple of the episodes that he cameoed on. He knew her pretty closely. And just a little fun fact about her, she makes pies now. Online, you can see them on Instagram, and they look really yummy. If you want to read one of these plaques, you can go to readtheplaque.com and see the one with this picture. I wasn't able to see all 3, but I could see the second one with the picture of his house on Degrassi CSI's Instagram. Sadly, I couldn't zoom in close enough to read it all, but I think it looks really cool, and if you can see more of these, let me know. I want to see more of them. And that's how Bruce Mackey was honored in Canada after his death. And I'm going to leave you with just a few ways that you can honor Bruce and bring Bruce vibes into your everyday life. So I would recommend following Michael Threets on Instagram. He's a really good librarian that has a good community vibe about him that I just find really, really fun. You can follow my friend Dustin at Dustin Can Read on Instagram. He's a great queer bookstagrammer, and he has a podcast all about books also called Dustin Can Read. He's actually just a really nice guy to talk to, and he's super sweet and funny. And he hosts monthly book clubs on Instagram. So see queer librarians in media nowadays, which is really awesome. You can see George and Lance on She-Ra and the Princess of Power. They're in season 2 finale as middle-aged librarians and fathers to Beau. So queer dads and librarians. You can see Cassandra on the show The Librarians. She's a queer librarian in media. The librarian in the Netflix show Hilda sadly isn't given a name, but she is a queer librarian, so I'll recommend watching that. You can also see Shelved. According to cbc.ca, it's Canada's Abbott Elementary, and the 3rd episode features a fun drag queen story hour. So that's a Canadian show about a library and library workers with a drag queen story hour. That's pretty queer library. And you can also see my favorite, Mr. Ambrose, on Bob's Burgers, voiced by Billy Eichner from Billy on the Street. And he's also a cheerleading coach. We first see him in the episode Topsy, season 3, episode 16. And while I don't think he's exactly like Bruce, I can't say for sure because I never met Bruce, but Mr. Ambrose is kind of sassy and maybe a little bit more stereotypical, but still a queer librarian. I think that's important in media. And lastly, some books with Bruce Mackey vibes, kind of queer librarian vibes. These are all nonfiction. So Out Behind the Desk, Workplace Issues for LGBTQ Librarians, is an anthology of personal accounts by librarians and library workers about their queer work experiences. You can also read The Secret Lives of Booksellers and Librarians by James Patterson and Matt Eversman, which isn't directly queer, but still libraries and library workers. You can read Liberating Minds, the stories and professional lives of gay, lesbian, and bisexual librarians and their advocates, edited by Norman G. Kester, or LGBT and Public Library Services by Otis D. Alexander, or The Queen's Librarian by Carol Cummings, and Librarian Tales by William Ottens. There's also a children's book about a queer librarian named Tinyville Town, I'm a Librarian by Brian Briggs. And I love that it's a kid's book. And then there's also One Teacher in 10 in the New Millennium by Kevin Jennings. So that's about queer teachers and queer school workers in general in the New Millennium. There's also Southern Gay Teacher by Randy Fair, and Private Love Public School by Christine A. Yard. And then there's also And They Were Wonderful Teachers, Purge of Gay and Lesbian Teachers by Karen L. Graves. And then the last one is School's Out, Gay and Lesbian Teachers in the Classroom by Catherine Connell. I had to save that one for last because, Degrassi School's Out, Gay and Lesbian Teachers. I thought that was a fun way to end that. So that's how we can recognize Bruce and just other queer librarians and teachers like Kenneth Zeller in our everyday lives. And that's it for today. Thank you for coming to the library. I hope you learned a few things, and I hope you come back next time. Next time I'll be talking about Ida the cat. So that's Ida Makes a Movie, and just how that inspired Degrassi and what we can learn about this cat and our human Ida and how they relate. So join me next time for that, and you can find me on social media if you would like. I am Sierra Lucy05 on Instagram and TikTok and Redbubble and Etsy and just anywhere you can find me. If you don't find me through that on a social media platform, then I'm not on there. And you can find me on the Degrassi Kid Discord because I am a member of the Degrassi Kid Podcast Network. And hey, I just love Degrassi Kid, okay? Don't judge me. I just love them. And I'll catch you next time. So check it out. Like a book. I don't know how to end this. Love y'all. Bye.